How do you become a front-end C# developer? What tools, languages, and frameworks do you need to know to get started? In this video, we're going to go over some of the options you have as a C# developer and look at what you'll need to know for each. Then tomorrow, I'm going to issue a challenge to you that will test your front-end skills. Now, before we dive in, I want to share a couple of things. First, if you're interested in improving your C# skills, this is the place to be. Subscribe to the channel. With over 500 C# videos and counting, this is the perfect place to learn and grow your skills. Second, if you're looking for free C# resources, head over to iamtimcorey.com and go to the Resources tab. You'll find my podcast, the C# projects page, and much more. And third, if you're ready to dive deep into a specific C# topic, I have a variety of courses that can help. Not only will you receive a world-class education, but you'll also help fund my free content so that everyone can have a great education in C#, not just those who can afford it. All right, let's jump on over to Visual Studio. And what we're going to do is kind of an overview today. We're going to talk about the different ways you can be a front-end developer in C# and kind of some of the shortcuts to take, as well as like what things do you need to know for that particular type of front-end developer. Because there are different types. Now we'll talk about web developers, probably the primary one that you'll think of when you think of front-end development, because of the fact that it's most easily separated from the rest of the code versus the others, but you can definitely be a front-end developer in desktop or mobile as well. And if you haven't already watched the dev question video I did this past Thursday on this topic of front-end development, I would encourage you to do that. That's probably a great place to start, because it answers the question, what is front-end development? So great place to start. But now we're going to get into how do you be a front-end developer. So let's start with a new project. And we're going to start with, we're going to avoid web until the end, because that's the most common one. I think we want to touch the other two briefly first, just to see, hey, what do you need to do for this front-end work? So what we're going to do is we're going to look for WPF first. That's probably the place to start. You can scroll through this list if you want, or what you can do is come up here and say either type WPF up here, or you can come over here to desktop and you have your options. You also have Windows Form app. Actually, Windows Form apps, they were the first type of desktop app that .NET had. And besides console, they had that too. But Windows Form apps has also outlasted all the rest of them pretty much. Now, WPF is still around, still supported, but it is seemingly less supported than Windows Forms. Now, they're still making changes to it, but at a slower pace for WPF. So just note that, you know what, Windows Forms has outlasted a lot because of legacy. People are still using Windows Forms all over the place because that's what they started in when they built that application years ago, and they keep upgrading it, or maybe not. Maybe they're still in .NET Framework. But that's why Windows Forms still survives. I think the best desktop application type really is probably WPF, but we'll talk about Blazor Hybrid, because that's that might be a replacement for it eventually. But for now, WPF, we're going to start there. So WPF, we're just going to call this WPF, and we'll call a solution name front end demo. And yes, .NET 7. Now, WPF, to be clear, stands for Windows Presentation Foundation. It's important to know that stands for Windows Presentation Foundation. It depends on Windows libraries to be installed on a computer in order to run, which means it cannot run on Mac or Linux. So even though it's .NET Core or .NET 7, which is .NET itself is cross-platform, WPF is not, because it's tied so tightly into Windows. But the reason it's .NET 7 is because of the fact that you get the performance benefits of .NET 7 and all the speed benefits that have come from that, even though it's not cross-platform. So this is front-end development. And what you're going to be living in is this window editor here, where you can see we have both our text as well as what's called XAML, XAML. This is where you would design your page. And so you put things on here like a button, and you say test, and then this whole screen becomes a button because I never gave it a size, so then you can say the height is 50 and the width is 200, and now you have a button on your screen. And you may say, man, that seems like an awful lot of work. And you can open up the toolbox and drag stuff on here, so you can open things up and say, let's drag on here a list box. And so let's actually do a label instead and put a label there. And that was anticlimactic. Well, yeah, it was, because it has no clue what to do with this label, so you have to actually fill it out. And you can go to properties and do that. So you can say, what's this label? It has no name. Let's give it a name, test label. And let's give it some text. So you can say, where is the text? Oh, content. That's why. Yes, that's formatting the text, which we can change the format to be like 36 pixels. And the content is hello world. And where is it? Well, if you get rid of this, right? Oh, if you move it off it, there you go. Now it's right up there in the upper left-hand corner. So you can drag and drop a little bit. You can use the property window to modify things, but really what you're doing is living inside of this XAML. Think of this like HTML, but not. Okay, a similar structure. So you have your open tag, and you have your close tag, and you have content in between, and you can also nest things. So you can nest content inside of other content. For example, I can take this label, I can cut it out from here. I can say, you know what? So let's replace test with that label. Now the label's inside a button, and notice how it clips off because it's actually bigger than the button is. So we can actually, let's go down to 30 for our text, and there we go. It kind of fits. We could play around with that, but it's formatable just like HTML is. Now, a lot of people don't like XML or XAML. I'm sorry, XAML, because it's a new language, and I get that. But there's a ton of power here. You can do things like animations. You can do 3D rendering stuff. You can do a lot of stuff. You can use a tool called Blend to even make things even cooler. You can have gradients and swirling colors and bouncing balls and all the rest if you want in your UI. Now, a lot of times people don't want that in their UI. They just want the gray, Battleship gray boxes. That's fine too. But the other thing that XAML does provide you is that you can make this screen like a web window. It can resize the layout based upon the size of the window. That's super helpful compared to WinForms, which out of the box does not do that. Now, there's ways you can kind of kludge it into doing so, but this is built right in to do this. It also relies on your video card. It actually uses your video card, not just your graphics card, not just the CPU, which means you can do really cool things with like video and images and other things on this. You have a rotating 3D cube of videos if you wanted to. So there's lots of stuff you can do here. And if you wanted to be a desktop developer, I would encourage you to learn XAML. And I know you may not want that, but trust me, that's going to be one of the things that will really allow you to make some really cool desktop designs. That's WPF. So if you're going to be a desktop developer, WPF's one of your options. WinForms is another. That's pretty much a drag and drop. The problems there are that it's an older style, it's harder to design, and it will not resize natively with your monitor. And so this resolution you design it at is the resolution they have to use it at. Otherwise, it's going to either look ugly or cut stuff off. So that's kind of messy. If you're going to go this direction, the first thing to learn is not WPF. The first thing to learn is C#. And with all of these front-end choices, the very first thing you need to learn is C#. You don't go somewhere else first. Don't try and learn the flashy UI first. Don't maybe even lock in on front-end development. First, learn C#. learn all about that. I have a video on that, how to learn C# in 2023. Check that out. It's going to give you all that good advice. If you take the C# Master Course, which is my my kind of pillar course, it's a course to take you from nothing to being an actual developer in the real world. Most of that isn't focused on UIs at all. It's focused on just using console apps because we're learning about just C#. We're learning about the language itself, how to make that language work for us, how to take advantage of that language so that when you come in here and look and say, okay, why are we using a partial class? And what is this here, which is actually inheritance, in case you didn't know, and what's a constructor do? And, all this stuff. You actually know what's going on here. You know how to make use of it, how to change things up and make it work for you instead of just kind of hoping it works, which is not a great strategy. Hope is not a strategy. So once you get C# down, then you learn your user interface, which in this case, I would learn WinForms and I would learn WPF. It's the first two things to start because that'll give you the most coverage. But if you want to be purely front end, then probably WPF. They'll give you the most latitude to actually make a good UI that is, that you spend more time on making look right and work right. So there is another option though, and that's one that kind of crosses some boundaries between desktop and mobile. And so if we were to add a new project here, one of the options we have, if we look at, we have desktop apps, but then if the drop down here, I believe, has MAUI. So .NET MAUI or .NET MAUI Blazor app. These are your two options that will allow you to not just do desktop, but also Mac desktop, as well as Android and iOS. So you can target the Windows desktop, the Mac desktop, Android, and iOS. So both mobile and desktop, not the web, not at this point. But with these, if you choose .NET MAUI, you're going to be writing in XAML. And it's a very close XAML to this WPF XAML. So if you learn it for WPF, you're getting pretty close to knowing what to do for .NET MAUI. The other option is to do .NET MAUI Blazor apps, which is not the same thing as running a web page. It's actually running locally. It's not going to the web, but it is using web technologies, which means it's using Blazor to do your desktop app or your mobile app. So that's the other option. So if you're already in the desktop space and you want to add a new desktop that's up and coming, as well as add mobile, then choose .NET MAUI because of the XAML nature of it. Just to be clear, these are just the templates that Microsoft gives us. If you want to choose another template that is more feature-rich as far as your desktop and mobile, and also has web, you'd probably choose either Uno or Avalonia. Both of those are third-party projects, but they both use XAML to create for you that full range of options for cross-platform, for desktop, web, and mobile. So, but inside the .NET projects, .NET MAUI app for if you're a desktop and you're comfortable with XAML. If you're comfortable with the web, then .NET MAUI Blazor app, because it's the same thing, but for with Blazor as the way to build the app. So that's kind of what you do for desktop apps, and it's kind of what you do for mobile apps as well. You have to know first C#, and then let's say you're going to learn desktop and mobile, then you probably go .NET MAUI. So you learn XAML next, and you learn XAML pretty well and know how to make it work for you, and then you can learn the intricacies of deploying mobile apps and so on using the .NET MAUI template. If, however, you are going more of the web route, then I would encourage, again, the Blazor, which means you have to know HTML, CSS, and probably some JavaScript, as well as the Blazor, and then and that's .NET MAUI specific stuff. So let's just open up the .NET MAUI app. We'll just call it MAUI app. We'll let this load. What this will do is it will create the template for us. And if we look at the main page, notice it's main page.xaml. So XAML, you don't have the nice preview editor like you would with WPF. So learning it in WPF first can give you a head start because you get used to how the structure works of XAML. So you can work more like you would on the web where you don't have that nice preview unless you then launch the application. So if you launch the application, then you could do hot reload and see what's going on when you run it. So I'm not going to launch the application now, but again, XAML. So that's really what you do for both desktop and mobile. Okay, so C#, XAML, and then just that's it. Okay, that's all you need to do for desktop and for mobile. And if you want to learn first legacy stuff, make sure you have that covered. Then do Windows Forms, and you're good. For mobile apps, it's C#, XAML, and .NET MAUI if you are going the also desktop route. So that's kind of it. Let's talk about now, let's go web because that's where a lot of stuff is. And there's a lot of different options here, but we're going to pull up just one project type to start with. So we'll go web. There we go. And we have ASP.NET Core Web App, which is a Razor Pages app. We have Blazor Server. We have Web API. We have MVC, WebAssembly app, Blazor WebAssembly app. And we have a couple of like gRPC and so on. So what do you choose? Well, I would choose out of the gate either Blazor Server or Blazor WebAssembly. And yes, this is going to change in .NET 8 where we'll choose just Blazor and then choose which pieces of Blazor you want. So learning it now is a good option. MVC, this is, in my mind, a lot more for legacy than it is for new apps. It used to be we'd only have two different project types. We had the web forms, and then we had MVC. And MVC was kind of the new way of doing things that was more web compliant and all the rest. And so we built MVC apps. But that's no longer the case. We no longer have just that one option. We have a lot of different options, and this doesn't feel like it fits very well anymore for most things. There are some things that it fits for, but I have found for the most part that it's not really fitting anymore. It's kind of a secondary option. So usually what we're doing is creating APIs. That's a pretty common thing to do. And Razor Pages, if you want pages that don't change, you don't have interaction on them, then Razor Pages is a good option. But then if you want interactivity, like the client-side interactivity you'd get with other frameworks, then Blazor Server, where you have an always connected environment, or Blazor WebAssembly, where you act like the JavaScript frameworks, where you download all the code to the client and run it there. So either one's up to you. Which one you choose is entirely up to you. Let's choose Blazor Server first because this is the easier one. So we'll say Blazor Server, and we'll talk about what you need to know as a web developer. So if you want to be a web front-end developer, okay, we're just talking front-end here. We're not talking about back-end or full stack. So as a front-end developer for web, what do you need to know? Well, again, C#. You're going to need to know C# because even on these pages, so let's look at the counter page. Well, that right there is C#. Okay, so you're already talking about knowing C#. I would encourage you to learn about, this whole project should be just front-end work. Sometimes people slip in the business logic in the back end. You shouldn't, but they do. And I understand. And if it's a small enough project, it's fine. But as the project gets bigger, it should be just the UI, just for the presentation layer of your code. So you still need to know C#. That's the foundation it's built upon. And then you need to know HTML. And I don't mean just knowing how a tag works. Like, okay, I know this is a paragraph tag, so that's good enough, right? Or I know it's an H1 tag and that's a header. That's not good enough. You need to know why it's an H1 here, and is that even the right call for this page? Because if we look at the host page and we come in here and look, our content goes right here. So yes, that's probably the right call because of the fact you should have one H1 tag on the page. This is the kind of the overall title of the page. And then you only have H2 and below for the rest of your headers. And you do it in order. And this paragraph has a role on it. That can be really helpful for screen readers and other things. Knowing what classes are, that's really basic, but it's really important to know how that works. And so, yes, knowing HTML and knowing modern HTML. Modern HTML is important. Just saying, I put a div tag around everything is not good enough anymore. And so your page will rank down. It will drop in status if you don't know how to build proper HTML5. And that has changed in the recent years. And so knowing how to do that is important. So once you learn C#, then you should know HTML, modern HTML. You should also learn modern CSS. If you start to say things like centering a div is hard, then you need to update your skills in CSS. There's about 3 different ways of doing it easily inside of modern CSS that centering on a page is not difficult. So that's something that needs to fall by the wayside in your skills. So you need to be able to be comfortable opening up this CSS, looking at it and going, yeah, I can update this. And in fact, even here, we'll notice they have things like colors right on the page, right in your CSS. Well, that should probably be extracted. This is no longer something we want to do because of the fact that these should be brand colors. And if they're brand colors, they should be variables. And they should be at the top of the page. We should have a root section that has our variables for our brand colors that we then use and just say, this is our brand blue, and this is our brand purple, and this is our brand white, whatever we want to call it. But that way we don't have to repeat ourselves and then go, oh, I need to change this specific color to a little bit different color and then go find it. So that's something we need to think through. Also, I'm not a big fan of mixing like the name of a color and then also the hex color of a color and the RGBA. I mean, RGBA and hex is fine because, there's a reason why the A is there. So that may be fine, but mixing the rest is not great. Knowing what rems are versus EM versus pixels and knowing how to do that, it's important to know how to do. So learn CSS and learn it well. Now, I would encourage you to also learn Bootstrap. And some people push back on Bootstrap and say, oh, it's too heavy. It's definitely not. I've done videos on that. It's super light. Microsoft uses Bootstrap in their templates. This is Bootstrap that's running. Notice Bootstrap right here. Super light and super powerful. And you can do a ton of stuff. There's their variables right there. Root, and then there's the variable colors. So you can just say BS-blue, and that's the blue from Bootstrap. And you can override those too, just so you know. So knowing CSS and how it works is important. Knowing the Bootstrap framework, it's not as important, but it's important enough. If you're going to use Bootstrap, learn it. Learn it. Don't just use the basics of it, because what you'll find yourself doing is writing CSS that you don't need to write because there's already something in Bootstrap that covers you. So now we have C#, HTML5, CSS3. We're on the path to becoming a good front-end developer, but what's next? Well, you need to learn JavaScript. And yes, I know that makes some people twitch and they say, I want to be a C# developer. Sure. At least learn some decent foundational JavaScript. Not a framework yet. Learn JavaScript, plain JavaScript. Know how it works. Know what it looks like. Know how to put things on the pages, because even in Blazor, you'll use JavaScript sometimes. So that's the next thing to put in your lexicon. Know how to call, well, we'll get there with Blazor, but know JavaScript, at least at the vanilla level. So C#, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, what's next? Well, after that, know how to learn to use the tools, because those tools are really important. Know how to launch and run a web application, test it out, do hot reload, and all the rest. But then you have a choice. And one choice is that you learn a JavaScript framework. So built into Visual Studio, if you were to say add new project, we can clear all our search things here, and we can say React. You can have a standalone JavaScript React project. We can have an ASP core with React.js. We can have, we have a lot of different options here, React and Core Preview. Let's just choose our standard standalone JavaScript React project. We're not going to add an integration for Web API. We'll leave it alone for now. But just note that if you're going to create a React project, you also need to know API, because React is only client side, and you'll need to be able to call it with something. Now, if you're purely front end, no problem. You're set. You can just do front end work. You don't have to worry about making an API, just calling the API and knowing how that works. So, but if you're going to learn React or Angular or Vue, then you need to learn how to work with NPM and know how that works. And so when you're looking at packages and knowing how to search for packages, and yes, there's an NPM search now built in, NPM search built into Visual Studio. And you know how to look at your code and go, okay, this is what this does. Okay, this is not just pure JavaScript. It's a mix of JavaScript and HTML and all the rest. And you have to know not just JavaScript, you have to know how to work with React to not just have a whole bunch of divs. That's not a great thing. You need to be able to use correct HTML5 and integrate your CSS well so that it builds pages that are easily readable and all the rest. So if you want to learn a framework, that's the next place to go. Learn JavaScript more deeply, and then learn your framework of choice, such as in this case, React, and learn how to integrate it back into HTML and CSS and your API calls to your C# application. That's one way of going. And that adds learning NPM, adds deeper JavaScript, it adds the JavaScript framework into your learning path. Plus, you should probably learn also about things like ESLint and how that works and how other things like that work, so you can get the best experience possible out of your front end with, in this case, React. The other way of going, if you want to kind of shortcut the process a bit, is to lean on Blazor. Now, if you choose Blazor Server, it's super easy because you don't even have to know how to call APIs necessarily. You can just have this call class libraries that would be your backend code. So that's an easier way. If you choose Blazor WebAssembly, you have to call an API just like React does. But you can learn Blazor, which Blazor uses the Razor syntax, things like this right here, where this is C# code. And this is saying, the @ symbol says, hey, bring that C# code into and mix it with my HTML. So again, this is a C# method. And this says, hey, bring that C# method in and mix it in with my HTML. And this creates a rendered page. And so there's a lot of stuff you can do here because of the fact you're already leaning on your existing C# knowledge and just kind of mixing it in with what you already know about HTML and CSS in order to make a front-end client-side web app. So that's the way to go for if you want to do a shortcut of the process and not have to pick up deeper JavaScript and also a framework, as well as NPM, as well as the tooling around JavaScript web applications and testing and all the rest. So this is the way I recommend at least starting. Okay, you can start in Blazor and add React, absolutely. So that's definitely a way of going. That way you get into a front-end development faster, and then you can, if you want to expand your horizons and be more marketable to more places, because you also have, in this case, React. So that's definitely an option. Now, as a front-end developer, one of the things, let's just start up Blazor Server. whichever, if it's desktop, mobile, or web, if you're a front-end developer, one of the things you're going to have to think about is not just the functionality of the page, but it's also the look of the page. Now, if you're fortunate enough, like this right here, that's not going to pass muster for me when it comes to putting a production web app out. You need to have a much better look than this. A much better design, a much better structure, and all the rest. So knowing how to work with things like Font Awesome, or in this case, Open Iconic, I believe, but knowing how to bring in icons in and knowing how to style a page to make it look right is important. If you're fortunate enough to work with a designer, a person who is a graphic designer, that's super helpful because they can give you a design, maybe in Figma, and you can then transfer it into the web design. Just note that you should not just take a Figma design and have it say build the web page and just do that, because it does not build a good web page. You need to be able to make your own changes to that and make your own structure out of it, because otherwise what happens is it looks pretty at certain resolutions and maybe even at multiple, but it does not function well. It does not work well for screen readers. It does not work well on a speed test and all the rest. So make sure that you know how to take that design and translate it into something that's good for the web. So same thing is true for WPF, WinForms. If you're going to be creating front end only and you're focused on front end, you need to be able to learn how to do good design, learn how to use tools. For instance, learning how to identify colors and use color palettes and make sure that the colors complement each other and so many other things is important as a front-end developer. So there's a lot of different ways you could go. Okay, so we've already looked at quite a few different options, and there's even branches off of those that you could go. When you decide, hey, you know what, I want to be a front-end developer, you're probably going to lean mostly towards web because it's the broadest pool of available jobs. And if you do that, then your next choice is, okay, do I want to shortcut the process and get in there faster with Blazor, or do I want to learn a framework as well on top of, again, C# and HTML and CSS and JavaScript? Do you want to add a framework on top of that or not? It's up to you what you choose, but then from there, I encourage you to practice for sure, because it is not knowing how to consume tutorials that's going to get you a job. It's being able to build actual applications, and the way to do that is to practice that. And that's why I want to encourage you to make sure that when you say, yes, I'm a web developer, or I'm a mobile developer, I'm a desktop developer, that you don't have to say it too loudly, because of the fact that your work says it for you. And so you have something to show, you have a portfolio that says, hey, here's the things that I have done. So what we're going to do is I want to challenge you a little bit. If you say, you know what, I've got this, I'm going to be a front-end developer, or I am a front-end developer, I've got a challenge for you. Tomorrow, I'm going to issue a challenge and say, okay, you got 4 days. Here's a challenge in front-end development. So if you want to be a front-end developer, you want to try it out, you want to test out your skills in front-end development, then check out tomorrow's video where I will give you a challenge, give you 4 days to complete it. And then at the end of that 4 days on Friday, I will give you my response. Here's how I would do it in one of the front-end frameworks. I'm not going to choose all of them. I'm not going to redo it for desktop and mobile and web. I'll probably choose web because it's the most direct connection to front end only. So you'll have a challenge that's just front end, and your goal will be to see how you do and see how you implement that and see if you can make it work in a way that that's good. It's impressive, that you can show off in a portfolio, and that you can just kind of prove to yourself, yes, I know what I'm doing. Okay, so that's coming up tomorrow. But until then, I want your thoughts on what you want to do. Is front end only kind of your route in C#? Are you looking for back end, or you want to do full stack? just note there's a lot of stuff to learn just in front end. So the question is, full stack just adds more stuff. So it's something to think through when you're thinking about the different types of developer you could be. Okay, but the foundation of everything, before you go anywhere, C#. Start there. Even if you don't know what you want to be, start with the foundational C# stuff. The C# Master Course, that's what it's designed for, is not only to teach you all that good foundational stuff, but also to give you introductions to all your different project types. So you can kind of see, oh, I really like WinForms, or I kind of resonate with Blazor Server, or I kind of, resonate with APIs, building those, or building out databases to support, the backend code or whatever. So it's designed to kind of help walk you through those options so that you have a little bit of skill in all of them and can really see yourself in development in a certain area, front end, back end, full stack. And you have that foundational support either way, no matter what you choose, to do it and execute it at a high level. All right. So again, come back for the challenge tomorrow. Let me know your thoughts down below on what you think of front end development if you tried it, if you like it, or if you don't. Thanks for watching. As always, I am Tim Corey.